There's a glassy-eyed man who greets everyone. He just wants you to eat and be good. He's rejected 100 times a day by stone-faced looks. For 20 years, 10 hours a day he stood, trying to convince passers-by to give it a spin. He just looks at everyone and gives them a grin. You say you've ate and he just asks, when? If you don't sit down, he'll just say thank you. The man down the way is missing all of his buttons. His shirt and his pants hang off him weakly. He's shredding fabric everywhere that he goes. One wonders how can such a confident man appear so meekly. Now picture all your favorite places. They never let him inside. The fact is that he was rejected by every job he's applied. You can tell by his cadence that nothing disturbed his stride. But here he is, his sole self, where everyone can get a good look. The watch salesman pedals around the busy beach, but that's only after he got thrown out of the station for being a nuisance and causing another commotion. The woman turned him down and the locals gave him a citation. Everybody these days buys their dated equipment from a fancy store. You know the ones where they'll spray you as you walk in the door? Hands full, pockets empty, he navigates the shore, where million-dollar boats are visible in the distance. The pressured and pressed man's hat flies off. He's got somewhere to be and he's running late. He's afraid to go out, but this is his business. If you look at him too long, you'll see that he's ready to abdicate. See to it that you don't get lost in the face of despair. You can see in his face he doesn't think it's quite fair. From the whites of his eyes, you can tell he's had quite the scare. Whether he'll make it or not, you'll never know, because you can't keep up. A completely bent in half woman waddles alone. The pain of her years weighs down her body. She nearly slips and falls on all of the rocks. Her predicament would be helped if her shoes weren't so shoddy. The line forms behind her and somebody yells. The bag dragging behind her rings like bells. You just know she's never stayed in fancy hotels. What will she accomplish as her exercises are fruitless? A man sits by the fountain and cries. He's hurt by something, but he speaks as a foreigner. Even if they wanted to, no one can comfort him. You can dismiss him or pretend he's a professional mourner. No matter what the truth is, no one is in his corner. Obviously, you wonder out loud, what is the cause of his pain? Why is it so hard when the meaning can be so plain? The one-way discussion continues without a coherent listener. I see all of them and do nothing but walk by. Such a thought of disconnection keeps me up in the morning. I've got nothing to offer the priest with the eye patch. When did I become this, and what was the warning? Their hands are out and their minds are clear. My biggest realization is that they just aren't in my sphere. What does it say that for them I can't even shed a tear? Hello, says the man with the glassy eyes as I stroll down the street. Three men, three not too different lives, worlds created with the gun and the knife. The oldest was stuck in a jungle for no good reason. The younger was in a scorching desert, tricked it was for freedom. A third was out to the ocean, pushed and left. The youth of their lives had been of theft. The oldest man was struggling through his fading age. He'd been created in hell and now felt like he was in a cage. Nothing tasted right anymore and nothing smelled the same. Is it normal to wake up in a sweat after a dream of fire? Will he ever sleep again, or will he always be awake, roaming the sidewalks thinking about his estranged? His hat says identity, but his eyes said blinks. When he asked for help, everyone said, no thanks. It's a problem, man. My life burned up in the grass. I regret that all I did was try to please the top brass. If it wasn't so hard, my knees would still bend. I'd return to the jungle where my ancestors lived. The thought of a plane or a traveling car to that place raised up in anger and a thought of repentance. It feels good to be free, says the band that had played. He forgot to skip, and with his whole being, he had it paid. When he struck up a match to light the sweet leaf, his entire life came by and called him a thief. If I could go back and talk to the past, I'd tell it to find a new person to torment and a new ideology to fight against. After all, nothing is worth oppression and the causing of misery, and the megaphone blasts what he doesn't like or want to hear. He met the salesman with extremely large eyebrows, who was hostile to the fact that he just wanted to browse. But hey, he'd coolly show you all the new machines. He'd be very agreeable with you if you had the means. Choose from the selection, after all you know what is best. I've got a few recommendations though if you'd like to select. I care nothing for laws, just my paycheck. Business is business, forgot my lighter, here's the key. He spins the metal top round, round, and round, and when it stops, you bring the hammer down. He was a middle-aged captain. Everybody saluted him, even those that didn't like the color of his skin. He wanted to know his future, but the tarot reader had fallen asleep. To kill the time until tomorrow's thundering rain With all his pets, he rode around in the back of the van. He takes a break and asks, "Is it okay if I sit here?" The rabbi says yes, but the service begins in an hour. The captain says I'll be long gone by then, like the Mayflower. By now, the captain's just simply afraid of the water. On the earth, he lives like a squatter. He knows now that humanity can't trek further than it's supposed to. If I could just stay in one place and try to anchor down, I'd see there's nothing wrong with having no fear. It cripples every moment and movement you once could compose. "Sorry, we don't have," says the impatient waiter. "That's okay," he says. "I wanted something greater." The waiter nods and fetches something dark. The captain looks down and asks, "When did it get so dark?" "Well, probably it had something to do with you giving up on your mission, and now we want to see exactly if you have anything left or remaining. Or do you just want to keep reading gravestones to pass the day, when you could be out there living on the bay?" The captain shook his head and left him a tip. He knew the only thing left now was to get on a ship, preferably one with a large gas engine, no relying on cells, since those can blow away and run everything you have. The captain stares out into the ocean and wonders where's his son. He looks at the names on the column and doesn't see him. Now the anchor's pulled away and the ropes have been untied, while the captain's just wishing that he hadn't already died. The youngest man had been dirt breathed into, but ever since then his life has been turning on a screw. Now he just spends all his time watching video screens and telling people, "No, you can't go in there," in a voice so disgruntled it barely counts as language. "Yeah, that's all you're good for, to be a bully and a brute," an insensitive but marked off soul yelled in his direction, who had tried to get through without any protection. Is it normal to oneself despise, to look in the mirror but not greet your own eyes? He goes home to the same place that hates him. The whole husband thing isn't working out, and I don't have good news about his job as a father. He goes out on the lake and then swings some clubs. He counts down the hours until without judgment, he can go to sleep. And he throws off his clothes and lays them in a heap. However, he just stares directly in the sky, which is trapped by the ceiling that is willing to deny. He gets up to wander and get another drink, but everyone tells him he's making too much noise. "I'll show them someday," he says with a limp, knowing nothing will come from an empty threat. How can you simultaneously be considered a scourge when you are at the boundary of being submerged? His friends say, "Hey, get a dog, a pet," but they don't exist at all either except as a debt. He makes angry and hateful cries at a local restaurant where he is thrown out for having too much sweat. The game plays on without him and the crowd cheers. He no longer looks up at any screen and shuffles along. At some point he realized nothing could be amended. He stepped away, and it was all ended. Had the fates of these men been ordained, or had a network of sorts made them chained, their parents, schools, sports, and governments making them who they are? Or maybe it's not like that, and they had a responsibility, or a duty that they wished to fulfill and failed, or maybe they're cryptic symbols not supposed to be deciphered, since no God gave us a meaning other than survival. Who else can we blame for our sudden arrival? The old man mayor slams his cane on the ground. The council protests against his corruption. The newspaper is looking to write something profound, but the mayor claims he doesn't have to give any answers. I'm not sure who gave him the power. Do we have no choice but to let him continue? Is it necessary for our lives to be so dour? Or is there something you and I can do? The bishop closes the door behind him, and he tells the unbeliever what will happen next. How his family will leave him and his future's grim. He recommends consuming something which can't be seen. I'm not sure who gave him the power. Do we have no choice but to let him continue? Is it necessary for our lives to be so dour? Or is there something you and I can do? The father removes and wields his belt. The child trembles by themselves in the corner. They've long learned how to cover a welt. The power of birth can determine our fate. I'm not sure who gave him the power. Do we have no choice but to let him continue? Is it necessary for our lives to be so dour? Or is there something you and I can do? The president watched the protesters blaring. He knew that the millions are being hurt. His tears suggest that he may be caring, but he throws up his hands. There's nothing we can do. I'm not sure who gave him the power. Do we have no choice but to let him continue? Is it necessary for our lives to be so dour? Or is there something you and I can do? The prosecutor knew they weren't guilty but proceeded. It is all part of the system, they justify to themselves. In their mind, the victim shouldn't have conceded. Life is struggle, and giving up won't get you a diamond. I'm not sure who gave him the power. Do we have no choice but to let him continue? Is it necessary for our lives to be so dour? Or is there something you and I can do? The sign said that a watch was found by the sea. At one time I wondered who it could have belonged to, and why they left it, and whether they want it back. Why is my mind now only focused on when the payment is due, when I'm currently feeling something only felt by a select few? Maybe at one time it could have belonged to me. Maybe I've blown it and lost my chance to attain anything other than what I've become. You really would have thought I'd found it in France. With such impossibilities remaining, it's hard to be free. The sign said that a watch was found by the sea. Why can't I wait? Why do you always need to know the time? I can't relax or enjoy myself and just watch the waves. Is missing something I'm not waiting for a crime? Or should I be more focused on attaining the dime? When I could just sit and eat from the tree and have a place in mind where I don't need to be first, where I don't need to know all the news that is bad. Can I enjoy my spins around the sun without feeling like I'm cursed, and just take a moment and not worry about the temperature of the tea? The sign said that a watch was found by the sea. I pick it up in order to see what hour is it, as if that matters when you're roaming aimlessly, as if you've got something you forgot to omit, and you think to do as only you see fit. Which is saying something, since you once weren't so gutsy, and life passed through you using you as a sleeve, and when you seized control it didn't back against you. Only then did you understand what you could weave, and only then did it not matter what would be. The sign said that a watch was found by the sea. The fisherman doesn't talk to anyone but still has a friend. Everyone likes him but me. I'm definitely still waiting. They're looking at me like I've done something to offend. Crowd controlling all the animals while up the steps they ascend. The whistle you blow, that's the only key, as if getting there safely is not to get there at all. They lost it and abandoned it not knowing it'll wash up again on the next squall. They thought if they waited, they wouldn't have time to escape. The sign said that a watch was found by the sea. Did they even wake up in time to read the sign? Or were they too busy punching numbers into a machine? If this keeps up, how do they know when the sun will shine? Maybe they were told, look, you can't drink from the vine. Don't they know that not all people can live like a bee, flying peacefully and dutifully in circles around the flies, while others like us get angry and riled up, as if around every corner is surrounded by spies, though when you peek your head around the corner, there is nobody. The sign said that a watch was found by the sea. He says yes, but meant no, or was it the other way around? A word to the average might be to say nothing at all. He seems incredulous and asks, was the watch really on the ground? You better claim it, sir, before it gets run out of town. I hope the sir is honest, because I can't afford a finder's fee. No worries, good sir. You can take it back with no complaint. By now, of course, you are sensing a vicious trap, crossing itself and calling itself as a saint. But this is all part of the item's future biography. The sign said that a watch was found by the sea. In my experience, the best sunsets don't end too quickly, but when you look away too long, they destroy themselves. You know that when you've missed it, you start to feel sickly. When you can't enjoy it, that's when you've gotten into things too thickly. You'll never make it successfully as a retiree. You can't stop moving and shaking and your hands keep typing. The life never passes you by because you're moving too fast. By the lost watch, you gotta keep griping as your view of the world evolves into hyperbole. The sign said that a watch was found by the sea. I can't help but wonder what hell is like when I'm in paradise. I keep looking for something to fill up the gaps, but if I do something once, I'm certainly not doing it twice. And I wish I could say, hey, that's my only vice. But just like the watch was found by a they, he or she, I'll refuse to keep moving and marching past spires, representing things I don't believe in and could never have been, only to discover it's all tied together with wires, though maybe then the craftsman would be bent on a knee. The sign said that a watch was found by the sea. Through the valley of trash he commenced. He needed to find some answers to his questions, marching up the hill and climbing the fenced areas and enclosures that warned him to stay out. But now there was very little he wasn't ready to go against. After he'd run into the man at the paper stand, who said all your problems can be condensed into a single point of nothing, by a single man. Who could this man be, our wanderer asked. The paper stand man said first he had to buy a magazine. So he flipped through a few of them and passed to the one that had next month's winners in his pages. So he dug out some dollar coins to get the forecast, and the paper stand man smiled, pointed upward, and then he said, "On the hill, do you see the mast? There's a monk up there that's figured it all out." He spent the last 13 years thinking about life, and now he has a recipe to fix all humanity. He did it by meditating, studying, and throwing off his wife. They say he has ascended to the next level. No taxis or buses can get you on the mountain. There are no roads, just a jagged elevated path. If you take it up far enough, you'll find the fountain. Drink it up because it's the last chance you'll get. So keep all your fingers poised to count in. But what do I need to bring? Flowers, wine, or a coin? He asked, "What exactly is a mountain?" $3.50, but I can't tell you the rest. His thighs ached, his feet blistered, and his back bent. He forsook his fellow men, seeing not another one. All the wild animals gathered as they picked up his scent. He couldn't make it another hour this way, but there was no shortcut or cheat to crawl through the vent, so he fashioned his walking stick into a bully club, keeping away all the evil spirits that hell sent. Only boredom and visions and mirages greeted him. As he rounded a corner in yet another switchback, he saw a little church and getaway resort. "Narrow, narrow," he called as he ran up the track. "To get where you're going, you need a bigger bottle than that," said the priest who met him and took his pack. Once the collapsed man revived and was able to speak, he thanked the priest dressed all in black. Then he asked where in the world he was at. "That really depends," said the priest, "on where you're going." The man told him, "I'm going to the place where I can be made fresh, clean, and meet the all-knowing." "Oh yes," said the priest, "I'd say you're 10% there." "Oh, how can I be so far? That's not what the map's showing." "This is uncharted territory, my friend," said the priest. "Here's the one place where with land we are overflowing. You better rest now because tomorrow will be the longest." The priest discussed with the traveler various subjects. "I don't want to talk about religion today. It's all I ever do from one day to the next. I'd quit this job, but then I'd lose my donkey, and I'd sure miss the feel of those checks. But I'd be happy to give you all my opinions. I'm a little out of the loop. What's going on with Malcolm X?" The man broke the news to the priest and got up. He began to move on, realizing that it was time. He climbed up the rocks and fell into a ditch. His teeth broken, his body now covered in slime. He could only get up, brush himself off, and focus on his goal of the changing paradigm. He had to find the next station rather quickly, preferably before the church bells he left behind began to chime. His water was low, his stomach empty, and his spirit was broken. With no food, no water, no floor, dustpan. His only path was forward, linear as time moves. So he took his steps so fast, it was as if he had ran. Nothing was stopping him now, the determined traveler. The paths were bad and the signs didn't work. He passed the time by counting from 1 to 100 again. In the shadows, all his friends and villains lurk. He knelt for some god to direct his judgment, but the only answer was the way the trees above him jerk. He took a deep breath and put one foot in front of another, knowing that his only permission was his duties to shirk. To life, country, family, and history he was absent. Up ahead were tall, whitewashed walls. A stern, frowning face that said there's no vacancy here. A governmental project that placed towers formed into balls. The sign on the door was not written in English or Hindi, so he knocked on the door and floated down the halls. The never-ending labor took him from one reality to another, fragmenting each of his spirits into separate stalls, feeling that each organ of his body from him had been ripped. In the last hall sat a man cross-legged and alone. He really did seem to glow and be written by angels. Above was a swirling pattern that congregated on his throne. His eyes were closed and traveler's presence was not acknowledged. In his pocket the wanderer felt for a stone, to place it at the king's feet or toss it on the ground. They sat in silence until the monk let out a groan, perhaps a cry of impatience or a cry of an unbearable pain. Finally he spoke. Left to lock, right to unlock, or maybe, actually, it's the other way around. Exit is on the left, and on the right is chalk. Draw a circle around yourself and plunge right in. Swim until you reach the large metallic-coated clock, and when you've conquered space, you can fight yourself. With what's remaining, build yourself a yellow smock. Now twirl into the ball of a green glass snake. "I didn't quite catch that. I don't understand," said the traveler in a voice of exhaustion. The monk closed his eyes and raised up his hand. The wanderer collapsed from his knees to the floor. He could do nothing except weep into the pit of sand. He had failed to get his answers and would not make it down. His only hope was to permanently fall into dreamland, perhaps the same one we've all found ourselves trapped in. I looked out and saw two small ones, a mom, a dad, along with a dog that runs. Outside they'd be in the sun's rays, soaking. I thought these only existed in lore, but there they were, the people next door. She always hung up her clothes outside. I only saw her when her laundry dried. She never did or tried to have a conversation. To her I must have appeared a bore. I know nothing except she was one of the people next door. I heard the sirens and saw the lights. It was one of those unpleasant sights. After hard nights, they're dragged down the stairs, struggling as the paramedics chore. Strapped in was one of the people next door. I heard the monk pounding and smoke in the air. I went over to see him on a dare. He was in his chair after punching too many clocks. This is what calms me down from what I abhor, said the angry one of the people next door. In the evening, I would hear their secret knock. So when it all blew up, there was no shock. They replaced the lock and the feds blew it off. The manager called them an eyesore. To the jailhouse, they'd be the people next door. The retired man admitted he eats twice at dawn, one breakfast at home and a second at Big Swan, with his friend John and the other old knights, as they talk about their days in the war. To me, he was just another one of the people next door. She told him all white women were the same. He's showing her pictures and making a claim. Who's to blame is not my business. He has a new one and calls her a whore. I feel embarrassed to hear the people next door. He said he reincarnated as Buddha, that he was from the lost tribes of Judah. He's going to Bermuda without his medicine. He's been reading much too many pieces of folklore. He was the most colorful of the people next door. I heard the breaking of a window pane, the smashing of glass for ill-gotten gain. I decided to refrain from interference. I guess I shouldn't ignore what happens to people next door. I got up when I heard the knock. When I saw the book, I had to balk. He was in a smock and said he witnessed. When he talked, I began to snore, which is also the response to the people next door. His walls were covered in paper notes. He's busy tracking all the votes, all the quotes he knows by heart, but it sure made his place look poor. But I didn't need all the people next door. I never liked to leave the place. Most people haven't seen my face. Without a trace I could vanish, and there wouldn't be much of an uproar. I wonder how I appear to the people next door. In a Moravian hole, I found my soul. A man was sitting playing guitar, jamming as if he could have been a star. He wasn't good, I guess. His papers were a mess. I sat like a debtor, wondering if I could do any better. He strummed a little too hard, like he was in the backyard. People strolling in the bank couldn't stand all the grain. When the wind picked up, the entire show started to blow up. Fiddle singer playing for crowns found himself in one of many lockdowns. His livelihood and everything he knew went completely and utterly out of view. In a Moravian hole, for now that's the goal. I'd never been happier or more sincere than in the land of foam beer. Can I please take the fastest plane to escape what's in my brain? Ahoy, said the man at the station. Ahoy, I said to the root of the nation. He realized we had a different nomenclature, so he just shrugged and laughed at good nature. I'll never know what was in his mind, from the front of his head to behind. Perhaps he was just wanting some range, or maybe I could have tossed him some change. I never got to know him all that well. The barriers between us never fell. I'll never know what he really desired. Maybe I'm destined to remain uninspired. In a Moravian hole, I found my soul. I'd never been happier or more fulfilled, because well here, I'm never thrilled. Can I please fly the world's fastest plane to escape what's in my brain? Up the hill I heard the Bandura, walking up I thought I heard the Torah. The lady plucked them in well, for around her the world had failed. I dug in my pockets frantically, like a process that grew inorganically. I only fumbled for the greatest coin in the earth that I could purloin. I remained baffled by everything, especially that I couldn't do anything. She took a plane and flew a flag, and I was just left holding the bag. In a Moravian hole, perhaps that's the goal. I've never been more fulfilled or sincere than in the thrilling land of beer. Can I please take the fastest plane to escape what's in my brain? Another man told me good day today. I wanted to remark that the sky was gray, but I wasn't for talking and scheming. And to my alarm he just started screaming at everyone and even at me. I should have told him to count to 3. He unloaded such a volley of curses, enough to get drug away by nurses. I realized he just wanted some conversation, but I was much too invested in getting to the station. I'd missed my train, but this is Moravia. There are more than 2 ways to get to Scandinavia. In a Moravian hole, I found my soul. In a Moravian hole, for now that's the goal. I've never been happier, more sincere than in the land of foam beer. I've never been happier, more fulfilled, because well here I'm never thrilled. Can I please fly the world's fastest plane to escape the pain that's in my brain? I'm looking for my soul in a Moravian hole. Moscow's a rumbling, in Beijing the walls are tumbling, and Prague keeps bumbling, Sarajevo's bumbling. Well, forgive me, has Washington ever done anything right at all? Jerusalem keeps swelling into Ramallah's dwelling, Lisbon's yelling as Oslo is selling. Do you suppose Athens can cover itself in a shawl? Kiev wants recognition, Wellington has a commission, Port Louis is but an apparition, Caracas is under demolition. Can you believe Minsk wants the whole world to be in a brawl? London once ruled the world, Guatemala City is found curled, Suva is kinda twirled, like Islamabad world. Do you remember that time we all watched Warsaw fall? They say Thailand's really changed, Budapest has turned deranged, and don't leave Tehran shortchanged, and don't let Bangkok be defanged. Do you ever wonder why people allow Vienna to stand so tall? Mexico City's on fire, Dhaka's hanging on a wire, the situation Baku's dire, the man in Bogota's a buyer. Will you ever give those stuck in Juba a call? Of course Pyongyang is hated, St. George's ways are dated, Vilnius must feel faded, Rabat finds itself castrated. Will the people in Nairobi ever get a place in the hall? Havana stays closed off, Rome continues to scoff, Hanoi's everybody's trough, Bucharest mutters a cough. If I say hello to Taipei, would that break protocol? Kabul lost its head, Sofia ran out of bread, in Kampala there's no bed, in Kigali you'd be dead. Have you ever heard that Timpus sent all the undesirables back to Nepal? Amsterdam will make you fly, Kuwait City calls you a bad guy, Sucre plucked its eye, Jakarta feels that it's nigh, in Lima doesn't seem obvious that things need an overhaul. Play hard in Belfast, Tokyo this way can't last, Panama City is so downcast, Luxembourg is bypassed. Ever wonder why Ottawa's keeping its eye on Montreal? So as Belgrade fades and Carr fills the blades, San Marino's got nothing but spades, Stockholm plays a game of charades. Does everybody understand Monrovia is built on a sprawl? Singapore still masses, Manila thinks we're jackasses, Brussels needs glasses, in Kingston we get grasses. Have you heard that in Beirut they don't like you if your name's Rosenthal? Seoul Main's scared, Dakar won't be spared, Madrid lays bare, Tunis stays impaired. Do you guess Damascus will have a vision on the road like Saul? Berlin's still divided, St. John's misguided, Djibouti's blindsided, Port Moresby's collided. What in the world gives Harare the gall? Vatican City is suppressing, Victoria is stressing, the port of Spain is depressing, Brasilia is guessing. Can people do anything in Manama but drink ethanol? Baghdad's still bombed, Conakry is calm, Sao Tome is beyond, Moroni makes bond. Can we do anything other than write Porto Novo and scrawl? Bern tries to isolate, Cairo carries its weight, Libreville's at the gate, Luanda's looking for the stray. Would you ever go to Bamako if you win a wall? Abu Dhabi is mocking, San Salvador is balking, Buenos Aires is blocking, Zagreb is talking. Could you ever imagine Algiers would have turned so banal? I ran away from Bridgetown and saw what's in Georgetown. The main man's in Kingstown and Port Villa was a clown. What in Palakur did you see that would shock and appall? Monaco gambles it away, and Babane says no to the gay. Paris remains an ashtray, Helsinki is but a cliche. How many people in New Delhi live in a chawl? Little Reykjavik is melting, Bratislava is sweltering, Tashkent is pelting, Tripoli is not helping, or Edinburgh and Dublin remaining forever in a lull. Moscow's a rumbling, I was walking down the side of the street and I heard a whisper out the side of a mouth. Marijuana? Coca? I'll sell you a smack that'll make your eyes turn black. I can make it turn you upside down. I can eliminate that frown. And it'll even turn your fingernails brown. I see you're in a lot of pain. No use but to surrender to a fresh escape, where you can just shut out the world and just stare into space. I said, no thanks, that's okay. I'll find another way. I'm not sure what it is, but I'll get there someday. The man on the top of the hill up there, yelling at all of us about hell. Philosophers telling him, you don't know me that well. He said, God Almighty's gonna take the reins, and you're gonna be wishing you'd have been different. Surrender your life to a secret power you can't see, but maybe you can feel. If stories inside your head are drilled, we'll place you in a friendly community that all believes the exact same thing, and you'll never have to worry about your doubts. I said, no thanks, that's okay. I'll find another way. I'm not sure what it is, but I'll get there someday. A man came to me and was holding up a ring and told me we could be forever. We could get a house in the country, raise a bunch of dogs, cats, and kids. We'd find meaning in each other and there'd never be another. In fact, we'd be the only ones. Eternal solitude and relaxing in the sun if you will just be the hun. I started thinking, he started smiling, then involuntarily it all came out. I said, no thanks, that's okay. I'll find another way. I'm not sure what it is, but I'll get there someday. Someone knocked at my door and rang the bell. When I opened it, they were holding a bunch of papers and asked me, are you going to vote for him? And I asked what happened to her. And they told me, oh, she couldn't run this time, but that if you just trust him, he'd change your whole way of thinking and make me believe in the country again, that we were going to do it for real this time. We promised really it'll all be different. Then they handed me the card. I said, no thanks, that's okay. I'll find another way. I'm not sure what it is, but I'll get there someday. The Nigerian in the funny white hat says, I've got something for you to listen to if you'll only come back in this very place around 6. He puts a necklace on me and tells me not to be afraid, but to write my name in the book of peace and part with all my spare change. I count what I need for the night and decide I guess it'll be alright, but when he reminds me to come back tonight, I said, no thanks, that's okay. I'll find another way. I'm not sure what it is, but I'll get there someday. In the middle of an ancient land, an old city, where everything and everyone was really gritty, and you couldn't expect anyone to give you any pity, a boy named George started to turn into a man. His mother and father told him, you gotta be able to defend the earth beneath you, and on it your life will depend. For little George, they saw nothing better than sending him to a school to learn a bunch of religious facts. So for the not-so-little George, there were 2 paths, be a preacher or a politician, so no math. Just a lot of laying around and reading in baths. He got good grades and did well in his tests, but his teachers said he did get into trouble because he didn't play well with others and made them pay double. He really didn't like others and called them pests. He didn't mind stepping over them as he climbed up the ladder. At his church, when people deigned to be late, he'd have them forced to be tied to a weight, and as a warning, he'd place their bodies on the gate. He'd grab the offering plate as it was passed around and help himself so he could build himself a castle. Everybody cowered a little bit when they saw his tassel. He ran for election, was waiting for the time to be crowned. He sharpened his blade as the vote started pouring in. His opponents started to taunt him, so he was put on the wall. After this, George knew he had to go AWOL. Since no one likes an axe-murdering preacher at all, it's hard to give you sermons about the good book when you spend most of your time running from the law. So he knew from this place and job he had to withdraw. He'd get his crown again when he found his little nook, so he started looking through the classified highlight. I can be a soldier for hire, he realized so soon. He wore a uniform so nice that all the ladies did swoon. So he went to war singing a very cheery tune, and he did a good job and got medals for all the remains that he piled up before him for disagreeing on theology, and wouldn't have mercy on them or take an apology. With a swinging mace, he beat in all their brains. He finally got a way to get to his goal. Only one man stood in his way, and that was his boss. He was mean, nasty, and like all of them are, easy to cross. If he was removed from the picture, it'd be no loss, so he offended him on purpose, so he'd take exception by taking his wallet and buying his wife a necklace. To promise her she'll soon see her husband necklace. The boss raised his pistol and said, go pay for the deception. Big George blew him away from where he once stood. The cops pulled him over and said, you gotta stop killing. We don't like what in this society you're instilling, so we'll take you to jail if you're perfectly willing. And George agreed this time, claiming he needed a break. So he walked the circle and learned the harmonica and received letters from a girl named Veronica. He promised her that when he got out, he'd kill her boyfriend Blake. Then they'd be king and queen and ride out to the moon. Veronica said there was only one problem though. You have to change if you really want to be my beau. I'm the wrong religion, just so you know. And I'm stuck in my ways, so I need you to convert. George took water from the sink and got rebaptized and became what he had one time despised. His old church was appalled he had changed for a girl in a skirt, but it was no big deal for him at all. He'd do it again. Warden came to his cell and said, "You're what I need. I'm looking for someone who can make men bleed." George happily said, "I'm the one to do the deed." He found his coat, his sword, and most of all his mace, and set out to fight some ill-defined people. Then he gathered them all up and pushed them off a steep hill. When the warden said maybe we should put them in an enclosed space, George just laughed as he watched them tumble down. Of course, you and I know they always put criminals in the Senate, and as soon as he was in office, he broke every tenet. Anyone who said anything negative was then hit. Veronica was soon the nation's financial secretary. I don't want to accuse her of stealing from the fund, but in that premium leather jacket, she sure stunned. Luckily, she had 20 different ones for when she grew wary of appearing to wear the same thing to all of George's parties. The townspeople had sure grown tired, so the warden to fix the problem was hired. George was walking in the woods just like he desired when out of the trees came an unusual bear, and the beast unzipped itself and stabbed him in the heart. "I'm a product of my mind," said the man who misread Descartes. George said, "Oh no, Mr. Cub, I've stumbled upon your lair." George sat down and forgot to have his last thought. Veronica found him and was distraught and said, "I'll bury him in his bloody clothes on the yacht." She didn't think any more about the plot because she went to Warden Blake's house to recover. George left behind his deeds and his name until gravediggers dug him up to steal his fame. George didn't make the right choice of not being a fighter and being a lover, and I'm not sure the next time it won't be the same. When you're the only car on the interstate, you might feel that you're just bait for the country cop trying to make his name. If that were you, you might feel ashamed. Maybe for him it's just a job to press people until they're just a blob. But if you pay close attention, maybe you can make it to the extension. I must tell you, a lot of these wildernesses want to frame you, throw you out with the misses. You need to find someone experienced with the unwritten rules, someone who can teach you to avoid those who turn men to tools. So I walked up to that beautiful man and said, "Vi govorite po angliski, this is my only plea. I need you to understand me so we can sail the sea. Vi govorite po angliski, because here is my only key. Please can you sail the sea with me?" The thermometer is speaking a tongue it never spoke before. When the new storm comes in, you better hit the floor. As you walk outside, it's time to cover your face. The air here will hit you like a can of mace. Sign says orange, do not leave the house. It will keep you cowering in the corner like a mouse. Pile of garbage is strewn across the lake. If you say anything about it, you'll be called a fake. When the rising heat puts you in distress, even the world's worst will be ready to confess. We did a lot of harm as a genus. Now we better learn how to live on Venus. So I walked up to that beautiful man and said, "Você fala inglês? I sure hope you'll say yes. My place is a giant mess because I'm always living in stress. Você fala inglês? Can you find a place to undress? Maybe I can relieve our stress." I can't help but think the official seal is quite offensive. Don't try to learn anything, it's too expensive. The institute operates exactly like a penitentiary. They'll lock up your savings for a century. When you stop calling, they start stalking. Don't run, they'll even catch you when you're sleepwalking. Or I guess you could join the forces, so you can pay for all them courses. Especially since they'll let you make bad decisions, as their order is to steal all your provisions. If you can't quite hack it, maybe you can cease, but without it, good luck breaking your lease. So I walked up to that beautiful man and said, "Parlez-vous anglais? Come on, 'cause I wanna play. How else can I waste the day and keep all my boredom at bay? Parlez-vous anglais? You're gonna make me pray if we waste our entire play. Can you feel the ground breaking under you? It isn't a completely unusual clue. The project is behind by 10 years, but you wouldn't know it from the cheers. Don't be alarmed by the cracks that's collapsing. That's only the fabric of our being lapsing. Everyone I used to know worked on the railroad, but now nothing but empty boxes pass for a load. If you mash the gas, it'll pop your tires in a place where there's no one to put out the fires. Why everyone forgot how to use cement might be our late society's final lament. So I walked up to that beautiful man and said, "Speak to Ingalls. When you escape me, time really dulls. Can we break through all the holes? I bet we can crack a lot of skulls. Speak to Ingalls. If we stop to watch the seagulls together, we can escape all the doors." I never thought something could cost 40 million, but then they added up everything into a trillion. Someone protested even I could spend the money better, or put it in something that doesn't fetter. But the man we let build the rocket was the only criminal left out on the docket. We got the coolest toys in the world, the ones that will kill you if you try to stop it. They'll put you on the gears. All the soldiers will watch and laugh over a few beers. Excess isn't the worst crime when compared to the ability to turn us to grime. So I walked up to that beautiful man and said, "Best les Angelou, or else I'll feel like a fool. I really don't mean to be cruel, but only with me can you be cool. Best les Angelou, you can have me working like a mule. For no one else would I ever be the fool." Call me guilty, but I am a man that wasn't is, in constant need of attention. She was a missus, but I need a miss. I needed something of a plan, but at every step I felt stumped, until she brought me a paper that when I read, my shoulders slumped. She produced a wicked chef who cooked up an epic meal to get her husband a present, for which he could not heal. I've seen something that makes no sense. My mind creates what I cannot see. To live like this I can't, because then I wouldn't be me. After a few weeks, she realized that we wouldn't cut it together. She left and I had to pay off the chef as he drove off in the nasty weather. Authorities rapping at my door. We've got a corpse, a restless ghost, wandering the world needing revenge. It's looking like you'll be toast. If you'd like to bargain with us, we'll haggle you down to a fee, because we've all been there before and know exactly how she can be. I've seen something that makes no sense. My mind creates what I cannot see. To live like this I can't, because then I wouldn't be me. I escaped into the northern flats. I'll make a new settlement in the cold. The earth is nicer here and I'm not too afraid of the mold. The government asked for accommodation, but I didn't understand their desire. They started gathering up my things and started calling me a liar. They placed me on a ship sailing directly into the bergs of ice. They're hoping you'll sink, and they don't care what's the price. I've seen something that makes no sense. My mind creates what I cannot see. To live like this I can't, because then I wouldn't be me. My boss burst into my hotel room and asked why I kept taking days off. You're saying sick as vacation when you don't even have a cough. I asked weren't they retired. They started stealing all the towels. I knew I'd have to pay the workers for trying to escape with the owls. When I showed up for employment, nothing was there but an empty white room. So I put my head down to sleep and dreamed about when I killed the groom. I've seen something that makes no sense. My mind creates what I cannot see. To live like this I can't, because then I wouldn't be me. Back when a man wasn't yet ready to call himself an ape, people angrily threw up their hands in discontent. While inside the schools they were just learning the truth. A man came screaming and running out of the tent. I've discovered everything that is new and you'll see. Though all the learned ones knew better and just scoffed. But you can't say anything about what I've found when you spend all your extra time hanging out in the loft. but I never figured out the appeal. Maybe it was a mistake of youth. Nebraska Man, are you even real? Did they ever find your tooth? If you stand up there and say you know everything, there's no problem. That all the lab coats are engaged in some sort of cabal. And only I, with my charts and graphs, know more than you. I figured it all out because I got all my answers from Paul. If you like that, then you'll be a shock to learn that in this very town, they're trying to engage you in godless philosophy and instruction, and turn you into gears that can be fit to a clock. According to my magic title, all of this will lead to your destruction. If you can cobble together a nice meal, you'll be society's master sleuth. Nebraska Man, are you even real? Did they ever find your tooth? The judge wanted to gain back control, but the man was too busy yelling and gesturing at everybody's wives. The whole thing was shredding in thin red lines, and the woman at the typewriter was losing her archives. The evidence all pointed to the corruption of us all, while the speeches came in with no real basis. And all their excuses serve only one purpose: to trick you into selling everything for an imaginary oasis. If you keep showing the newsreel, people will think that's the gospel truth. Nebraska Man, are you even real? Did they ever find your tooth? When the boring counter-arguments were finished, he started talking about how humanity is blown into holes. Of course, he'd cribbed these ideas from some others. He thought he'd done enough to get people at the polls. The government got confused and tripped over itself, and the judge wanted to just cancel the whole thing because he had something else going on in his oven and wished he could pass it over to some kind of king. If you keep fighting for repeal, you'll be shoved in a booth. Nebraska Man, are you even real? Did they ever find your tooth? Everything had begun to grind into a halt, and the crowds outside's care began to wane, because they realized the answers almost didn't matter. The man's lawyer suggested they try to run to Spain. I've never done anything in my life, claimed the man. That's the problem, said the lawyer. Please don't repeat that. But I'll bring in a new species to show off to the jury. And when he brought it, the judge said, that's a rat. And it's cinema of orange and teal. Everywhere you see Beelzebub. Nebraska Man, are you even real? Did they ever find your tooth? Once upon a time, the world was covered by hot water. Giant men poked their heads out of homemade caves. The man with the form started counting all their trees. But you don't have to give your stuff if your child behaves. One of the jurors began to complain rather loudly that he'd heard all this junk when he was old. When the judge pointed at him and told him to stop, the juror said, oh, I can't possibly be cajoled. You keep saying every knee will kneel, but I don't know what makes you the sooth. Nebraska Man, are you even real? Did they ever find your tooth? As the country went to war and lost all its money, the man on trial refused to pay half a cent. I haven't progressed that far to where I can use currency, but I can take donations from those willing to repent. I object to myself because I've had a lot of experience, and once watched a lower mammal pilot a jet aircraft, and I could see that you'd like everything that way. If I didn't know better, I'd say you wanted to reinstate the draft. He spoke with so much zeal. I didn't want to be uncouth. Nebraska Man, are you even real? Did they ever find your tooth? The defense lawyer flipped sides and said, I give up. I would like to be associated with regular society. But the tattoos betrayed his civility and poked out of his suit. The typist was crawling on the floor looking for the apostrophe. The man tried to speak again but was shouted down. All the people had grown much too tired of his crockery. The judge said, I've at last made my decision and now it's final. History sentences you to obscurity and permanent mockery. I wonder if you'll ever heal. You really drank too much vermouth. Nebraska Man, are you even real? Did they ever find your tooth? Old Man Yawn told the elders, you ain't doing this right. And they said, what? You're putting up a fight? The council said meet us up for dinner. He showed up but there was no table, a pair of handcuffs and some matches. Beyond's only utensils. His only song was one he'd learned at home. They took his clothes but not his right to say what he thought and felt like. So they threw his body in the river. Failed to keep orthodoxy. Better keep your mind straight and your opinion's right. Orthodoxy. If you're feeling too light, they'll decide your fate. She led the French into battle and embarrassed all the Englishmen. So when they got the chance, they knew they had to punish her. They put her on trial just to mock her, ridicule her fashion, and ask what she thinks she's doing. She wasn't allowed to defend herself, to say she was doing what she thought was right. The judge who sentenced her didn't listen, so Willie called her a witch. She failed to keep orthodoxy. Better keep your mind straight and your opinions right. Orthodoxy. If you're feeling too light, they'll decide your fate. Well, Pastor John said all men should be free, and when the slavers forgot to agree, he reminded them by gathering up a little band. They played quite an aggressive tune, making the neighbors complain they were too loud. When they asked him to please be quiet, he said sometimes you have to bring the axe. A tree don't chop itself down if it can help it. His band toured straight to the courthouse. He got bad reviews in the local press, so the authorities decided to string him up. Failed to keep orthodoxy. Better keep your mind straight and your opinions right. Orthodoxy. If you're feeling too light, they'll decide your fate. They got him for corruption of the youth. His lawyer said that's a very serious charge. You'll probably do quite a bit of time. Now I'll have time to read some books. They don't like that he questioned things and made fun of everyone's gods. Life would be much better if we didn't claim to know everything and more people thought of justice. They had a drink for him and he took his very last gulp. Failed to keep orthodoxy. Better keep your mind straight and your opinions right. Orthodoxy. If you're feeling too light, they'll decide your fate. Mr. Mandel told them to go to hell. When they questioned him about the authority, he said they were the worst of it, bringing in their goons to whack people down and throw them into cages just for being interested in the case. Maybe they're insane, maybe they're terrorists, maybe they just like to watch a brain bleed. He's got his boy to look after, so the aristocrats better keep clucking, because they won't get anything from him. Failed to keep orthodoxy. Better keep your mind straight and your opinions right. Orthodoxy. If you're feeling too light, they'll decide your fate. Oh, Eddie, you better leave. Both the place you were and the place you are. Julie, I guess they caught you too. Chelsea needs to learn to run and to hide and to not tell the truth. Because when you expose lies they call secrets, don't be surprised when they down planes and start to create chaos with old allies. The popes in their high chairs and logos would rather smite than be wrong. Break up the Trinity because they failed to keep orthodoxy. Better keep your mind straight and your opinions right. Orthodoxy. If you're feeling too light, they'll decide your fate. She said, hey, it's cool to go to school. The old man didn't like that because their religion was one of guns. They said it was for honor and for something above, but to us they're just a band of lifeless crooks and losers. They pulled over a bus one day, told the teacher she'd be tardy today, and the bus driver to enjoy unemployment. Then they shot the girl in the head. Didn't slow her down very much. She failed to keep orthodoxy. Better keep your mind straight and your opinions right. Orthodoxy. If you're feeling too light, they'll decide your fate. The man thinks he's a rebel. He says I don't have to believe in science. He says everything's a conspiracy and wallows in his own filth. He meets up with some hateful thugs who have nothing good to say. He thinks he's sticking it to the man, but he only hurts himself. His lack of faith betrays him. His eyes don't see the truth. Believing in nothing is no life at all. He fails to keep orthodoxy. Better keep your mind straight and your opinions right. Orthodoxy. If you're feeling too light, they'll decide your fate. Another man says I don't follow the law, and everybody hates him, since he seems to think that rebellion is to look out for no one else. I hate to be the one that tells him, the one that preaches the opposite. But trashing up the whole place is not a good way to make friends. No one will give if you steal, and no one will help if you hurt. No one likes it when you act like a jerk. He fails to keep orthodoxy. Better keep your mind straight and your opinions right. Orthodoxy. If you're feeling too light, they'll decide your fate. The Afghani couple who didn't want drones at their wedding. The kid in Sierra Leone eating mud for nutrients. The Romani who dodged hunting dogs. The Palestinian who had their house bulldozed. The Jew stuck in the wrong century. The ones unlucky enough to meet a Khan. The native who just wanted to keep his land. The neighbor's turkey who refuses to apologize to. The ones who didn't raise up the red books. The ones erased from pictures. The starving millions in Ukraine. I guess they failed to keep orthodoxy. Better keep your mind straight and your opinions right. Orthodoxy. If you're feeling too light, they'll decide your fate. I said, hey baby, what you doing tonight? Do you want to catch a movie or dinner for two? She said, I've got to do the dishes. I've got to go to work. I've got to mow the lawn. I've got to fix my car. So I drove my truck so very, very fast that I blew the wall and crashed. She came to my body and said to it, I'll put you back to pieces. I rebuild your mind. I'll put you back to pieces. Call me Dr. Frankenstein. I committed treason against the Queen and King because I preferred a little thing called democracy. The judge said, what you get is you get hung, you get drawn, then you get quartered. I got death to tyrants and also judges written on my chest. I would have written lawyers too, but the day had come. She came to my body and said to it, I'll put you back to pieces. I rebuild your mind. I'll put you back to pieces. Call me Dr. Frankenstein. The men in uniform went insane and I was drafted to fight. I said I didn't want to, but they put me in the middle. The rocket shot, the drones flew by, the bullets whizzed, and the tankers blew. You died for something they told me when I knew it wasn't true at all. I said just leave me on the field, it'll all turn out alright. She came to my body and said to it, I'll put you back to pieces. I'll repair your mind. I'll put you back to pieces. Call me Dr. Frankenstein. I was climbing the walls of the tallest building, trying to see if I could get to the other side. My hand slipped, my feet took off, gravity took over, I plummeted fast. As the wind whispered by my ear, I saw there was no other side. It was all a trick played on me by the broker at the lake. She came to my body and said to it, I'll put you back to pieces. I'll repair your mind. I'll put you back to pieces. Call me Dr. Frankenstein. I followed the preacher's compound because he said the end was coming. It was really hot, nukes were coming, 4-tailed horsemen, or something like that. That's the promised land, we've got to blow it up, so I helped him light the fuse. She came to my body and said to it, I'll put you back to pieces. I'll repair your mind. I'll put you back to pieces. Call me Dr. Frankenstein. I was walking down the road and lifted up my hand. A sputtering van pulled up right next to me. Before I knew it, I was pulled in, bag overhead, newspaper picture. I had no ransom money, so they tied me up and threw me in the lake with weights. She came to my body and said to it, I'll put you back to pieces. I rebuild your mind. I'll put you back to pieces. Call me Dr. Frankenstein. One day I was sitting in the bath and somebody walked in. Die, revolutionary scum, they yelled and flailed towards me. I fell backwards. My head snapped back. Here it comes. They laughed and danced, and I didn't even know what they were talking about. I was scheduled for the guillotine the next day. She came to my body and said to it, I'll put you back to pieces. I'll repair your mind. I'll put you back to pieces. Call me Dr. Frankenstein. A group of plastic army men burst into my room, and they said, we like your son a whole lot better. First they strangled, then they kicked, then they stomped. I got the gist of it. After they'd beaten in my head with the case, they said, hey, that'll teach you to fire us. She came to my body and said to it, I'll put you back to pieces. I'll repair your mind. I'll put you back to pieces. Call me Dr. Frankenstein. She pulled me aside and said, we've certainly had better days. I agreed with her, but I didn't know what she meant. She was thinking of breaking, of throwing it away, of jumping off point. I had to stop it. Flashes of despair reigned in my mind, a new future of non-existence. So I looked in her eyes and said to her, I'll put you back to pieces. I'll repair your mind. I'll put you back to pieces. Call me Dr. Frankenstein. I stepped up onto the train and detected that everything smelled like coffee and tea. From the car I did not hear what I expected. Instead I heard voices that could not agree. What are you arguing about? I wanted to ask, but I was too busy looking at the man with the flask. He stood there refusing to take a seat. while the young lady was finishing what she had phrased. Suddenly he snarled, "All women cheat," which shocked me because I had been raised to see all people as completely and absolutely equal. But I realized that his retort was just a prequel. The religious man in the front just snorted, but the lady was ready for a fight. "No, I think you've got it all distorted." To which the man lit a cigar and said, "All right." The religious man fidgeted with his pocket cross and said, "God said, man's the boss." He quoted some strange verse from an obscure book, one that probably didn't mean what he said it did. I saw the poor lady was completely shook from the way of the twitching of her eyelid. I wanted to tell him to cram it, dude, but I just looked back at the man who started the feud. The lady left to get a Bloody Mary. I couldn't blame her for leaving hostile territory. Staying to argue would win you no glory. I wanted to know the smoking guy's mysterious story. And as he puffed the cigar, he said, "Come here, kid." Despite reservation in the seat next to him, I slid. I sure wasn't wrong to consider him suspicious, as he immediately opened his mouth and said, "I'm a killer." But don't worry too much about it. It wasn't that malicious. I was convicted and told such a thriller that they let me go because of insanity, or maybe they felt a strange and rare twinge of Christianity. I got up to go, but he grabbed my arm and convinced me to sit and enjoy his society. I might admit, I was taken in a little by his charm, or maybe I was just having a bout of anxiety. "Who'd you kill?" I finally decided to say. "I've got to start at the beginning," he said, as he emptied the ashtray. "When I was a young man," he started plainly, "I was wealthy and could have what I wanted, and no man can deal with this sanely. And by one filling, I was completely haunted. Oh boy, you're young. I think you completely understand. And my life wasn't going exactly like I planned. I needed not one, but like 3 or 4. I became such a rage that I tried otherwise, but anything else became such a chore, and I couldn't relax until I'd had my prize. Don't you know that feeling of paralyzation, when the religious man says you're facing damnation? I knew I had to get married and find a girl that I could call my very own, one that for me was specifically designed, and one that no one else could have ever known, because I knew out of the 10 I'd most likely covet, and every time I saw the same sex, I'd say shove it. But one day I did see her, and heard her sing, like a siren, an angel, or a devil from hell. I knew she'd make my ears permanently ring, and that she would reduce me to one brain cell. Things were fine until we married, and that night, at which time we should have both taken flight. She had so many opinions and such ambitions, that I had to sit her down and explain the world, and that everything came with the laundry list of conditions. But she just sat there with her hair all curled. I felt my brain go completely numb, as I watched her mouth smack that gum. I started to design scenarios in my head, in which I could get away from her grasp, and this is when I started to imagine her dead, in a tragic way like Cleopatra and the Asp. But despite all these clouds flying over me, she told me something that would keep me rooted like a tree. "Let me be honest with you, kid, about what is life. It is a pollution and disease spread over the earth, and to contribute to what is already in strife." Well, I couldn't see any of the worth, but she told me that my version was now in miniature. All I could say is, "Are you completely sure?" That is when the jealous rage only increased. After all, doctors had started to swarm my place. "Take off your clothes," said the first to the least, and they all took a lot of interest in the case. "This is all normal," everyone always claimed, so I guess no one really should be blamed. Things only got worse after the birth, as everyone got to see I was second place, the object of ridicule. I looked at the thing in all its mirth, and I couldn't help but feel like a fool. All of my independence had been robbed, as it just sobbed and sobbed. A little clump of flesh with no ability. Its eyes shone up at me like it could demand all of my time and all of my availability. I know this whole arrangement had to disband. Probably worst of all, I'd been demoted, and that little thing just cried and gloated. Just when I thought it was at its worst, in came that cocky and attractive singer. I saw the way they smiled as they rehearsed. I sure couldn't stand the way he'd linger. At night I dreamed they were all together, perhaps all strapped up in leather. So one day I heard him crowing like a lark. I grabbed him by the collar and swung him, and I knew he would leave a mark when he landed directly on the trim. I said, "Get out of here forever and leave town." And she came in while he was stinging from the beatdown. I got so angry that I picked up a rock, a weight that we used to keep on paper, and slammed it up against her with such a knock that her eyes went up like vapor. "You've really killed me," her body whined, and I couldn't believe I'd been so blind. The man stopped and relit a cigar, and I wanted to know why he told me this, as I was embarrassed for everyone in the train car, and his eyes just shone in a state of bliss. He said no one should be forced to be born in brutality, but I guess that's just family morality. A man walked slowly up the steps of the courthouse. He had jury duty and felt he was too rich for it. He thought he shouldn't be considered such a louse. Maybe I can think of an excuse or maybe just quit. Claim the courts are corrupt and take a plane out of here where it does nothing except rain. In these cases, one hopes it all gets withdrawn and that the criminal just confesses to their sin, or that the district attorney is found to be gone and tried to trick everyone by substituting his twin. But today the government was much too aggravated, and the accused did not feel that punishment was fated. See, she'd been accused of not only a form of perjury, but with the slightly more serious crime of murder, all in order to raise enough money for surgery, as she was tired of being for men a herder, working late at night until the lights came on, making money for some guy named Juan. The state accused her of using poison to kill, even though there aren't many more uses for something so designed to fit the bill. Of course, that wasn't all the state accuses, and so a rich young man listened to all the facts and watched as all the lawyers held up artifacts. These are working girls' clothes, as you can see. There's no denying what she did and who she is. From the room did the defendant flee, leaving, unfortunately, the corpse that was his. You can do one thing and one thing only: convict and put her in a place that is lonely. But our hero studied the expression on her face and knew that this couldn't be all there was. He talked to his fellow members and asked them for grace. One wanted to go home, just 'cause, while another hated all women that made money. Another had shown up sick, with his nose all runny. A rich young man suddenly realized he knew her well. In fact, he was probably someone she hated, and in a manner, of course, had put her in jail. Their link was that they had previously procreated, because our hero had been the defendant's first, and if you heard the whole story, you'd think he's the worst. Suffice it to say, our protagonist left with the gift of a little more and a little less than pure cash. So the young woman found it necessary to take off swift to somewhere they wouldn't care if she had a stash, and once she'd gotten rid of that thing, she started applying her trade with a bang. All these rushing memories filled our hero with uneasiness, so he started thinking of what he could do to make it right. The proceedings went on with such a bleakness that he knew he could be her knight. The others were just ready to get out, including the one that was suffering from a severe attack of gout. He had the verdict in hand to present, confident he had done exactly what he needed. When he looked down, he noticed he had misspelled innocent. When the judge read it, he realized his will had been superseded, so the little working girl was sentenced to 20 long ones. But the workhouses should be carrying tons. There's only one way to fix this mess, thought the rich man to himself in a lonely moment. I have to use all the means I possess. He'd track her down and make the announcement. He'd tie her with him so they could be two. He'd stick beside her and never bid her adieu. In the workhouse, she learned how to smoke and drink wine and vodka made by unclean means, and how to numb herself as soon as she was woke, and to live like she had in her teens, surrendering herself to a completely different instinct. When she walked by the handsome guards, they all winked. When the rich man saw her, he knew it was time to go out, and he asked for forgiveness for what he'd done. Of course, I knew we should never have broken up. Please let me marry you, and as a token, take this crown. No thanks, she said with real congeniality, but I guess that's just family morality. The old man said there's a lot of ways to be unhappy. People tend to invent new ways every week. They'll take all kinds of stuff to make them feel crappy, because their outlook has become way too bleak. If I'm being honest, I want to escape this life, one in which corruption and mistakes are rife. What would I like to do, you might want to know? I'd like to go out and enjoy all that nature has to offer beyond digging with a hoe. I know there are ideas out for the agitator, but I feel so trapped and ensnared here. And who is the real, pulling the strings puppeteer? His wife and kids disagreed with him on everything, and they didn't like when he wouldn't eat or conform. He found he could no longer hold off until spring, when outside it would at least be lukewarm. His doctor was telling him about a new illness, and didn't want to become his accomplice. So the old man gathered his books, and went outside. He left a little letter for his wife and kids. When they found it, they all loudly decried the way he sold all his goods and forbids them from stealing it back from the peasants, who need them for the future of their adolescence. Into the cold the man found the train, and he was heading out to another nation, a place with an entirely unique terrain, so he could complete his renunciation of everything he despised and found unwise. But his life, he felt it, denies. The wind was blowing and the snow was falling. By the time he made it to the station, his breath paused. He started to regret all the time he'd been stalling, or maybe it was something years of smoking caused. He stood in line and had to sit on the bench. He realized he had a thirst he had to quench. When he coughed, he knew it was over, but he demanded that his wife not be allowed to see him one last time, and moreover, Did someone do something about this crowd? Everyone mourned at this old man's mortality, but I guess that's just family morality.